An old story and an old song. From Unto Dust by Herman Charles Bosman. Marie du Preez, oom Skalk Lourens said, had not been away from the Mariko for very long, but her overseas visit had made her restive. That, of course, was something I could not understand. I'd also been to foreign parts. During the Boer War, I had been a prisoner on St. Helena, and twice I had been in Johannesburg. One thing about St. Helena was that there were no Uitlanders on it. There were just Boers and English and Coloureds and Indians, like you come across here in the Mariko. There were none of those all sorts that you've got to push past on Johannesburg pavements. And each time I got back to my own farm and I could sit on my stoep and fill my pipe with honest Magaliesberg tobacco, I was pleased to think that I was away from all that sin that you read about in the Bible. But with Marie du Preez, it was different. Marie du Preez, after she came back from Europe, spoke a great deal about how unhappy a person with a sensitive nature could be about certain aspects of life in the Mariko. We were not unwilling to agree with her. When I woke up that morning at Nietverdient, Willie Prinsloo said to Marie during a party at the du Preez homestead, and I found that I couldn't inspan my oxen because my track chain had been stolen. Well, to a person with a sensitive nature, I can tell you how unhappy I felt about the Mariko. Marie said that that was the sort of thing that made her ill. Almost. Shortly afterwards, Marie du Preez made a remark that hurt me a little.
People here in the Mariko say all the same things over and over again,
Marie announced.
Nobody ever says anything new. You all talk just like the people in Skalk Lourens' stories. Whenever we have visitors, it's always the same thing. If it's a husband and wife, the man will always start talking first, and he'll say that his Afrikaner cattle are in a bad way with the hot water, even though he drives his cattle straight out onto the veld with the first frost, and even though he keeps to regular 7-day dipping, he just can't get rid of the hot water ticks.
Marie du Preez paused. None of us said anything at first. I only know what I was thinking. I thought to myself that even though I only dip my cattle when a government inspector from Onderstepoort is in a neighborhood, still I lose just as many Afrikaner beasts from the hot water as any of the farmers hereabouts who go in for the 7-day dipping.
They should dip the Onderstepoort inspector every 7 days.
Yuri Becker called out suddenly, expressing all of our feelings.
And they should drive the Onderstepoort inspector straight out into the veld with the first frost.
Willie Prinsloo added, "We got pretty well worked up, I can tell you."
And it's the same with the women.
Marie du Preez went on.
Do they ever discuss books or fashion or music? No. They also talk just like those simple Boer women that Schalk Lawrence's head is so full of. They talk about the amount of Kalahari sand that the Indian in a store at Ramutsa mixed with the last bag of yellow sugar they bought from him. You know, I've heard the same thing so often. I'm surprised there's any sand at all left in the Kalahari Desert, the way that Indian uses it all up.
Those of us who were in the du Preez voorkamer that evening, in spite of our amusement, also felt sad at the thought of how Marie du Preez had changed from her old natural self, like a seedling that has been transplanted too often in different kinds of soil.
One thing I'm glad about, though,
Marie said after a pause,
is that since my return from Europe, I've not yet come across a Mariko girl who wears a Ceylon's rose in her hair to make herself look more attractive to a young man, as happens time after time in Schalk's stories.
This remark of Marie's gave a new turn to the conversation, and I felt relieved. For a moment I had feared that Marie du Preez was also becoming addicted to the kind of bushveld conversation she complained about, and that she too was beginning to say the same thing over and over again. Several women started talking after that about how hard it was to get flowers to grow in Mariko on account of the prolonged droughts. The most they could hope for was to keep a bush of Ceylon's roses alive near the kitchen door. It was a flower that seemed, if anything, to thrive on harsh sunlight, soapy dishwater, and Mariko earth, the woman said. Sometime later, Tenis du Preez engaged a young fellow, Joachim Bontes, to come and work on his farm as a bywoner. Joachim was a nephew of Philippus Bontes, and I was at the post office when he arrived at Droogedal on the lorry from Seerust, with Tenis du Preez and his daughter Marie there to meet him. Joachim Bontes' appearance was not very prepossessing, I thought. He shook hands somewhat awkwardly with the farmers who had come to meet the lorry to collect their milk cans. Joachim did not seem to have much to say for himself either, until Tenis du Preez, his new employer, asked him what his journey up from Seerust had been like.
The veld is dry all the way,
He replied,
and I've never seen so much hard water in the Afrikaner herds. They should dip their cattle every 7 days,
he said. Joachim Bontes spoke at great length. Then, and I couldn't help smiling to myself, when I saw Marie du Preez turn away. In that moment, my feelings grew warmer towards Joachim. I felt that, at all events, he was not the kind of young man who would go and sing foreign songs under a respectable Boer girl's window. All this brings me back to what I was saying about an old song and an old story. For it was quite a while before I again had occasion to visit the du Preez farm. And when I sat smoking on the stoep with Teunis du Preez, it was just like an old story, hearing him talk about his rheumatism. Marie came out onto the stoep with a tray to bring us our coffee. Yes, you've heard all that before. The same sort of thing. The same stoep. The same tray. And for that reason, when she held out the glass bowl towards me, Marie du Preez apologized about the yellow sugar.
It's full of Kalahari sandworm, Skulk,
she said.
It's that Indian at Ramutsa.
And when she turned to go back into the kitchen, leaving two old men to their stories, it was not difficult for me to guess who the young man was for whom she was wearing a half-red flower in her hair.